Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
Tazria, it's a double portion, Tazria-Metzora, dealing with skin afflictions that also can grow on the walls of houses, scaly affection with oozing and loveliness like that. So glad you could join us. Remember, we're in Leviticus, we're in the priestly manual, which for them, they are very concerned with the laws of purity, right? We've talked a lot in here about pure and impure. We're going to remind ourselves, pure, I'm not going to do it. Somebody talk to me about what's pure and impure. What is that about? What goes on?
Well, ritually impure.
Good.
Yeah.
So first of all, it's ritual, right? This is not an ethical or moral.
It's not bad or good.
It's not bad or good. It is a ritual state.
And you have said the highest form is to be around a dead person. A corpse is the highest form. And it seems like all the others kind of are contaminated. Similarly, you can match it up to being having a brush with death.
So the impurity is communicated, the most serious impurity is communicated by a corpse. We know that from Torah. And there's a theory that every single kind of ritual impurity has something to do with a brush with death. So that is a theory. It's one I like, actually. That what's the most disruptive force to life? Death. So it makes sense to me that that would be that what communicates the ritual state of dysregularity, what communicates that is some contact with death in life. That when those two forces come together, there's a little shock, right? And it momentarily disrupts our lives. If you are not disrupted, you're pure. So pure just means regular. Impure means you are in a state of dysregularity and something has to be done about that. Because we don't want to bring impurity into a place of purity. Right? That we don't want contamination. All right. But we're going to really work at taking our 20th century, 21st century American, Western brains out of the lead here. And we're going to stay away from any kind of judging. There's no judging. This is not good or bad. This is just how it was. This is how it is to them. And so this is the manual that tells you, here's what you got to do when somebody's in a state of ritual impurity. Okay? Mm-hmm.
Is it almost like what we would have today? Here's what, if you have this, you're contagious for this many days.
Correct. If you have the flu, you are, right, your kid can't go to school until, can you believe this? 48 hours after their last symptom or fever. I'm like, what? So 48 hours after? They miss 2 days of school when they're not sick. Anyway, so.
That's what it reminds me of.
Right, that's right. So because it's considered you could be contagious until that point. Exactly right.
Not bad kid, good kid.
That's exactly right. Now, I'm not going to argue that there isn't a level at which ancient peoples thought that disease came from the divine source. For sure, that's here. For sure. That's an exception. So let's hold disease in a different place from ritual impurity caused by other things.
And the word disease itself is dis-ease.
And that's exactly what we're dealing with here is dis-ease. And for sure there is some sense of judgment around what causes tzara'at, what causes this disease. And we're going to talk about what the rabbis did with that. Okay. So we're in the first triennial year this year, so we are reading the first third of every parsha. And when we have a joint parsha this year, we are starting at 12:1.
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people thus. When a woman at childbirth bears a male, she shall be impure 7 days. She shall be impure as at the time of her menstrual infirmity. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. She shall remain in a state of blood purification for 33 days. She shall not touch any consecrated thing nor enter the sanctuary until her period of purification is completed. If she bears a female, she shall be impure 2 weeks, as during her menstruation, and she shall remain in a state of blood purification for 66 days. On the completion of her period of purification, for either son or daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a purification offering. He shall offer it before the Lord and make expiation on her behalf. She shall then be pure from her flow of blood. Such are the rituals concerning her who bears a child, male or female. If, however, her means do not suffice for a sheep, she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a purification offering. The priest shall make expiation on her behalf, and she shall be pure.
All right. So many things that come out. We just had in Parashat Shmini what we put in the body, right? What is categorized as pure and impure, what's okay and what's not okay to put in the body, right? What we can eat. There are many things that come out of the body that cause ritual impurity. One of them is menstrual blood, right? And which all ancient people saw as like seriously loaded, right? Who bleeds for that long and doesn't die or have a wound that is a mortal wound? So it's always freaked people out, and it's always been supercharged. Menstrual blood has always been supercharged. So it's like duh, right? So of course it's going to be something that contaminates regularity. You're not regular, right? Something else is happening. Same with birth. Birth is something that, if you know anything about that, it is completely disruptive of anything that has to do with normalcy or regular life.
Only for about 25 years.
Only for about 25 years. Completely disruptive. So childbirth is going to, of course, put one in a state of ritual otherness. You're not regular. You're not normal. You're not. Nothing about that is normal. You've just brought a human being out of your body. It's like there's nothing normal about that.
So I know that there's sort of disparagement of women, but was there any thought that because they're able to transcend these potentially life-threatening events that they are elevated in some way? I think it's always been both, right? It's always been that, yes, because women bring forth life, because they survive, bleeding once a month, because of all those things. Yes, I think that they are understood and seen to be in this place that men were not. The response of the patriarchy to that reality has been both sometimes positive. When you see, someone, a man and his partner gives birth, and you can see how moved he is, right, and how present he is, and all that. So I think that's been the true, as well as there's been a real reaction by patriarchy to that, right, and it leads to the denigration of women, right, because it's terrifying, right, that they're scary, and because of that they have to be kept down. Yes.
Why the difference between giving birth to a female or a male?
So there's several theories. Let's go with this theory that the brush with death is what is ritually contaminating. So how is that true here? She's bringing forth life.
There's blood.
There's blood.
There too.
Okay.
Many women died in childbirth.
Because many women and many infants died in childbirth. And so it could be understood as a brush with death that way. She survived, the baby survived, and maybe the baby doesn't survive. But in any case, it's seen as she's had a brush with death. It's possible, and one of the theories is that if she gives birth to a female, she's giving birth to and is ritually contaminated by a being that's also going to go through that every month and is going to bring forth life And in the ancient world, a lot of times, right? Not just once, right? So, that daughter is going to both menstruate and is going to have lots of babies. So that it's a kind of a double, right? It's double boy, right? The period of and therefore, in a way, the intensity of the impurity is double for a girl. And I have to think it has something to do with the fact because she's giving birth to one being who's going to go through those things as well.
But isn't it half the time? It's 2 weeks instead of 30 days? Or no?
It's 66 days instead of 33 days for a boy.
Question. Since the mother and the child both have the brush with death, but only the mother is rendered ritually impure, not the baby. Thoughts, feelings? What do you think of this?
I don't know. I think probably because a baby doesn't have much status ritually. The baby isn't going to walk to the temple precincts. There isn't a need, I don't think, to address what's going on with the baby. Baby's going to be with mom. And it's not going to go do something on its own that's going to contaminate other people. But possibly it's her brush with death that's actually most common. Like that was understood. It was understood that she was the one who was at most risk. That even though babies certainly are stillborn or whatever, generally they don't die because of the birth, right?
Maybe they don't have the status yet.
I think they just don't have ritual standing yet either for people to be terribly concerned with it.
Didn't they? I'm sorry to have to put it this way, but didn't they not count for a week?
That's rabbinic.
Oh, okay.
It's rabbinic that babies don't get their souls till 30 days.
And if they die in childbirth or within a few days, there's a difference in the burial?
Correct.
Right.
Correct. They're not buried in a Jewish cemetery.
They're not sort of considered to have been
correct.
Born,
which
is that still true?
In the Orthodox world, in the very Orthodox world, it's still true.
Where are they buried?
They're buried right outside the wall, by the wall.
The cemetery wall.
Yes. They are not buried in the actual Jewish cemetery because they're not considered a full-fledged Jewish person. I want to be clear that was once upon a time a kindness to families. So we go, oh, that's horrible, right? Because we have our judgments, which is fine. But if we step back and look at it from the rabbi's perspective, it was a kindness to the family because so many infants died. That you would be having a full funeral and a casket and burial and all that every time that happened, and what that would have meant for women and parents, it just would have been horrible. So it was actually a way to try to spare families. We can say what we want about whether that was helpful, but the intent was to not have people go through the full shiva, like everything, every time they lost an infant.
Two things. The ritual of purification with the bird, the turtle dove, is that also involving the mikvah in any case, or it's just the offering?
It's just the offering.
All right. And secondly, you mentioned that the soul doesn't enter the body up until after a certain amount of days have passed. Is that partially the reason that so many Jews don't have a problem with abortion? Because the child is not really a human yet. It's an appendage of the mother.
Yeah, that's part of yes, why it's permissible. It's also the valuing of the life of the mother over the life of the fetus. That's biblical. And in biblical terms, if a woman is pregnant and she's involved in a fight and she miscarries as a result of the violence, the man who caused it, and it says man, I'm not making that up, like it's in the Torah, he has to pay the husband, right, damages, the same amount as if he had injured her thigh.
So it's not murder.
So it's not murder.
It's not a human yet.
Because it's not a full-fledged human being yet.
And that's
correct.
Torah.
That's Torah. Torah doesn't talk about souls.
Right.
That's later. That's rabbinic. But Torah understands the fetus as part of the mother, part of the woman's body, until crowning.
Thank you.
Until what?
crowning, until the baby is crowned. When the baby crowns, it is considered a full-fledged human being and must be treated as such.
You said earlier that, of course, how pregnancy changes everything, and that's what makes it the special status. But at that time, were women getting pregnant?
So birth. I would say birth, right? Childbirth, I don't care if you have 12 kids. Like, birth, right, is this hugely altering. Pregnancy was, they were probably pregnant a lot of the time. Yeah. Although anthropologists believe that possibly one of the reasons we get so many gynecological cancers now is because we are exposed to way more estrogen than they were, that women nursed until children were 3 and 4, so that they actually, that's one of the ways they spaced their pregnancies, was they continued to nurse till the child is 4, sometimes 5, and then we're not menstruating during that time either. So they weren't just pregnant all the time. They had a spate of years where if they were nursing, they weren't menstruating and they weren't getting pregnant. And so we're exposed. We have a period every month and are only pregnant once or twice, and so that we are exposed way more, and that's why we're seeing the symptoms, right? That we're not designed to menstruate every month.
Right. There's a lot of living proof that you can get pregnant when you're nursing.
Oh, I'm sure. But of course. But generally speaking, that's how women space pregnancies, right? Is that they continue, what the result of nursing that long was that you had naturally spaced pregnancies.
Part of sentence 3 reads, on the 8th day, the flesh of the foreskin shall be circumcised. Is the foreskin considered impure ritually?
No. The foreskin is not considered to be ritually impure. It is considered to be an impediment. If we look at the metaphor that's used by one of the prophets that says, circumcise the foreskin of your hearts, right? That's a metaphor that's used by one of the prophets. So if we take that metaphor, cut away the thickness of your heart, clearly in the ancient world, in the ancient Near East, that is seen as something that's getting in the way, right? Cut away the thickness of your heart means get rid of it because it's preventing something. It's preventing your heart from being open, from being soft. So what is the foreskin preventing? Like what's it in the way of? One theory is that the foreskin, when you remove the foreskin, the penis looks like it does when it is ready to be fertile. So that the foreskin is an imperfection, it's an impediment that you remove so that then the member looks like it does when it is ready to be fertile. And that's how it's supposed to be. It's for fertility and it's for life, right? And so, and in some cases pleasure, so for women. And so that when you remove the foreskin, you bring it to the state that it was meant to be in. That's one theory. You might have your own about what the foreskin's in the way of, but otherwise it's hard to understand what that would alter in a way that seems positive, right? But I personally buy it that makes sense to me. Like that was my teacher of blessed memory, Dr. Tikva Freimer-Kensky, it was one of our first days of rabbinical school, and we didn't know each other very well. And she says, "Describe to me an uncircumcised penis." And we're kind of looking at each other. There were 4 lesbians in the class. And someone I said, "Don't look at me." Like what? So, it was an uncomfortable situation. But
the 7th grade discussion of this portion.
Yeah, right.
So what do you make of all this?
So we put it on the board, and it really kind of. I buy it anyway because I don't know what else to do with that, right? So, all right. So that's day 8. Where are we? She brings her, right?
So how are you going to make this relevant to today?
Yeah. Jody,
that's the challenge.
Patricia will not be returning to class, obviously. All right. So let's go to 13.
The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a person has on the skin of his body a swelling, a rash, or a discoloration, and it develops into a scaly affection on the skin of his body, it shall be reported to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priests. The priest shall examine the affection on the skin of his body. If hair in the affected patch has turned white, and the affection appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous affection. When the priest sees it, he shall pronounce him impure. But if it is a white discoloration on the skin of his body, which does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and the hair in it has not turned white, the priest shall isolate the affected person for 7 days. On the 7th day the priest shall examine him, and if the affection has remained unchanged in color, and the disease has not spread on the skin, the priest shall isolate him for another 7 days. On the 7th day the priest shall examine him again. If the affection has faded and has not spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him pure. It is a rash. He shall wash his clothes, and he shall be pure. But if the rash should spread on the skin after he has presented himself to the priest and been pronounced pure, he shall present himself again to the priest. And if the priest sees that the rash has spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him impure. It is leprosy.
What verse are you on?
We had enough? We're up to 9.
We're on verse 9. All right. Okay, so it is tzara'at, right? It is tzara'at. So then we're going to go on and get more detail about what if it stays stationary, if it's inflammation, like this, it goes on and on and on to help diagnose whether or not it is in fact tzara'at. So we know this is not leprosy. We know that. We know that this is not leprosy. Everyone chooses to leave the translation as leprosy because we still have such a visceral reaction to that word. And so they leave it. They know it's not leprosy because leprosy doesn't get better. Right? It doesn't go away. And in every case that we get here, it goes away. Right? Eventually, it goes away, and then the priest proclaims them pure, and then they do all the rituals that have to happen to come back into the camp. Right? So they're... Right, and then we're going to get here on the wall, and we're going to get it on cloth. So we know it's not leprosy, but because we still have such a reaction to that word, they leave it as leprosy because we don't know what it is. We don't know if it's impetigo, is it psoriasis, is it? We don't have any idea what it is. And shingles, right? They didn't know. So, but if it can be on the wall. Fungus. Right, obviously it's mold, fungus there, and on cloth, right? So probably something like that. And they equate that with what happens on the skin, right? We know that those are different things, but for them, it's tzara'at of the body or tzara'at of the walls. It's the same thing. And it had for them a very serious stigma. Very serious stigma.
It's interesting, too, they use the word affection, which I know is affect, when we say affliction. So the translation there is interesting, too.
Mm-hmm. So
what is the Hebrew word? Translated affection.
You have to find it for me. If the affection, 17, Vehine, nega, injury. Nega is an injury. So, what was I saying? So it had a very serious stigma attached to it, and there's different things that have to be done for the person versus the house, right? In terms of treating tzara'at. But because it goes away, we know that it can't be what we know as Hansen's disease, and it's not terminal, but probably it was frightening enough in its disfiguring of what a normal arm or whatever face looks like, that it had that same ability to strike terror right into people. So, and the other thing that is important is that the person isn't left, on a leper colony, they're left there, right? So it's very clear that they are outside the camp so they don't contaminate the rest of the camp, but the priest goes to them. The priest keeps coming to them to check them, right? So the priest is not saying, okay, you're out there until, right? He takes care of them. Like he goes to them to make a house call, right? To check on them and see where they're at with this tzara'at business, right? And then they are always welcomed back into the camp. We don't get anything that says, and should it be permanent, right? They shall live in the city called Tzara'atville, right? There's no reference to that whatsoever. So it seems that always it would have been something that ended and that they came back from.
This seems to be is this the only thing we call a disease that has this kind of treatment?
Is this the only thing?
I mean, it's not. A lot of other things happen to people.
Right.
Other than skin things. I don't remember any other, quote, what we call a disease in Torah.
I don't think I can think of one. We see.
No, but I mean, this is singled out.
Like it doesn't say if someone has a fever.
Right.
Right.
Cancer would be impure. I mean, that is not described.
Well, they didn't have that word. I don't think.
Right. I can't think of another disease that we're told about until we are told about them, but we're not given instructions about them, right? Like we know about boils.
So there's something clearly special about this.
It is. We get hemorrhoids, we get boils, we know about cataracts, right?
Those are not.
But they're not
impurities.
They're not discussed in terms of ritual purity and impurity.
Well, there's other things that are
I mean, and look, there might have been other things in this category that are not recorded, right? That we don't have, that we've lost. That's possible. But clearly this one was so visceral. Their response to this was so strong that, right, it stays.
But I like how the priest has to go to them, because the message for us, is we need to go and continue to check on them. When they say, whatever.
Correct.
It's our job to go check on them.
Correct. And that is a serious statement, right? That it is our job to know how people are doing. And that it was the priest, right? The person who was most responsible for maintaining ritual purity and impurity, that's who goes to their house or, to where they're hanging out. So it's very clear that it wasn't understood that the priest should guard himself against contact with it, right? That he had to go. It had to be the priest that diagnosed it. It doesn't say take them to the specialist, to the tzara'at specialist, right? It's dafka the priest.
George? Is there anybody there called physicians? I mean, was it medical people of any kind?
Yes. So there was definitely an understanding of people who were healers.
Yes, so did they go also?
We don't know. Because since this is the manual for the priests, we don't. Maybe that's why it's not here, or it may have been assumed that this disease was different, that the underlying cause of this disease was different than what causes other diseases, and it has to do with the spiritual realm. And so it had to be the priest who was the practitioner who would deal with it.
There were midwives, too.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Following up on what Jody said, isn't visiting the sick Bikur Cholim considered one of the most important mitzvot?
Absolutely. Actually, in the Talmud it says that the Shekhinah sits at the head of the bed of the sick person. So that actually when we go to visit a sick person, we're actually sitting in the presence of the Shekhinah. So they took it that seriously, right? That you're going to visit God when you go to visit a sick person. The other thing the rabbis say is, in the Talmud, is that they have a lot of formulas, and one of them is like sleep is a 60th of death, right? So they have a lot of these 60ths. And one is that every time you go to visit a sick person, you alleviate 1/60th of the illness. So if you think about that, then if you flip it around the other way, if you don't go visit someone who's sick, you are responsible now for a 60th of that illness that you would have alleviated had you gone. So it's a pretty serious statement about how they understood Bikur Cholim, visiting the ill. It wasn't just like a nice thing to do, like it was considered vital to the person's ability to recover. And there's lots of stories in the Talmud about a rabbi who was on his sick bed and another rabbi. I mean, really, they took this very, very seriously.
Also, it's a priority when you, like Jody said, in terms of how important it is, this person is such a high priority that the priest is going.
Right.
They're not spending it. It's up there with whatever tasks the priest has that are all high priority.
Right, which is a really good point, right? That this person's tzara'at situation warrants the priest leaving the sacred precincts, leaving all the business of keeping God and the Israelites in, good standing together. He leaves all of that to go check on what's happening with this person. I mean, it's a very big statement, about what's important. Right? And
I think of the Pope. You see I've seen it on TV where the Pope actually made a point of publicly, with coverage, going to wash the feet of the sick or something at that point. Probably comes from the same type of tradition.
Yes and no. I think there's more of an instinct in Christianity towards that kind of whereas for the priest, I don't know that there would have been a great celebration of the high priest going to feed the poor or wash their feet.
My point about the Pope is I think it's more for example.
Correct.
Than it is.
Correct. But here there definitely was a sense of this is important enough that the top guy, the top God guy, right? And God was the boss. God was the king. It wasn't you did everything and then there was God. We know this, right? It's a theocracy. So God is the ruler. So he leaves the service of the ruler to go deal with, Tim Jones, who has a case of tzara'at.
Then we also talk about just how bad the tzara'at is. That it's not that, it's so important to visit the sick that a person a priest. It's that this disease is so bad that it requires an equal and opposite response to make sure that before you come back inside and contaminate everybody, that you really are ready.
Right, and I don't think those are mutually exclusive, right? Like to say this is a really serious situation, but the big guy himself is going to go, tend to it and figure it out. Could be that's how serious it is, but you could easily have that interpretation and say, so therefore they're going to stay there, and only when they're sure it's gone do they come back. Do you know what I mean? I still think it says something that the top guy goes out and checks and sees what's happening with them, right?
Well, what it says to me is it's interesting. They didn't blame the person who got Sirach for having it, which can easily happen.
And so I wonder about that, actually. I wonder some about, we don't get anything about the response of other people to that person. Do you know what I mean? I wonder, the rabbis clearly take it in the direction that the person has done something to warrant tzara'at. And I have to believe there was some level of that stigmatizing. We just don't get any description about how other people treated that person, but I have to believe there had to be something.
So where did the rabbis take that? Thinking that...
Funny, you should ask, Bert.
I happen to see what's on the board.
Exactly. So the rabbis are very troubled by this parsha. The rabbis are very troubled they're not troubled by purity, because in the Orthodox community, they still live with the laws of purity and impurity, family purity, right? Orthodox couples don't touch while she's menstruating and for 7 days afterwards. So they still live with those ritual laws. So they don't have a problem with purity and impurity. They have a problem with how significant this seems to be, and how could it just happen? They don't like that. They don't like that it could just happen. And it's so stigmatizing, it's so serious that they're like, and they're asking the question too, what does it mean for us? How does this have anything to do with us? So they look at this word, the person who has the disease, what is the disease called? Tzara'at. Tzara'at is the disease. The person who has the disease is the Metzora. So,
does it relate to Torah?
To what?
To trouble.
So tsuris. So they would love to go there. Right? That's a place the rabbis would love to go. That there's a connection between Sara'at and Tsuris, right? They would love that. So I'm sure somewhere that's been put forward, right, as an explanation. But they get very creative about this. So the Metzora, the person who has it, the rabbis say, don't read Metzora, read instead Motzi Ra. So what is lehotzi? The Hebrew verb lehotzi? Ilu hotzianu.
Take out.
To take out. So don't read Metzora, instead read Motzi Ra, the one who brings out, what's Ra?
Evil.
Badness, evil. The one who brings forth evil. So then the rabbis are like, well, what evil is it that they bring out? It can't just be any evil, right? Because this is Sarat we're dealing with. This is big time. So they say, actually, this is a short form for Motzi Shem Ra. The one who brings Motzi. The one who brings out
Bad name.
Bad name.
So is that like a gossip?
Yes. So the rabbis say this is Lashon Hara. This is people who bring a bad name to other people. This is about gossip. All of this is about gossip. This is about people who talk about other people. And that is what the Metzora is the Motzi Ra, the one who brings forth bad. How? It's about Motzi Shem Ra, who brings forth a bad name. And the rabbis take this extremely seriously. The rabbis say, and this is all in the Talmud, like it's all there as part of halacha, it's part of like Jewish understanding of what's legal, what's the law. And they say the law is if you embarrass somebody, it's called halbanat panim, the whitening of the face, because people blanch when they're, I know I think of it as turning red, but people just kind of blanch. And so if you whiten someone's face, it's akin to murder. It's as if you have killed them. And because you can't undo it, you can't undo that damage. There's nothing you can do to rectify it, because even once that situation's over, they will never recover from that moment. They will always carry that moment with them. And so they're very serious, the rabbis, about speech and about how we talk and what we say. And most of what we say is gossip. Most of our speech is gossip. Pay attention this week. Just pay attention. I'm serious. When you pay attention, it's amazing how much of our speech is about other people. Most of it is gossip.
And they would say also you shouldn't even say good things about
Correct.
people, because
that's right.
Then you're tempted to say, but.
That's right. Because if I say that was a beautiful color Judith Ubik was wearing this morning,
but
somebody else could be tempted to say, I hate that color. And like, she's too old to wear that color. Like, right? Whatever it is that people have as their garbage, it's an invitation for it to come out. Right?
To the person, you're not supposed to say it.
You're not supposed to say it to the person if it's going to hurt the person.
No.
If I don't like her shirt, I'm not supposed to say that.
Yeah, of course. No.
And I'm supposed to say, I love that shirt, no matter what I think. So lying.
I choose that one.
Well, I do love the color. That's why I said. Lying in that sense is permitted. The rabbis permit lies,
little white lies,
that are to preserve the peace.
If the only function of telling the truth would be to hurt somebody, then all brides are beautiful.
Correct.
And all B'nai Mitzvah kids have great voices and did very well.
Right? Do these pants make me look fat? There is only one answer to that question.
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
But isn't gossip important for the establishment of the social network?
Explain.
The people with gossip, people know what the rules are. Like it's a form of setting up rules and the social norms and allowing people to interact, and even the communities even become bigger because the gossip, establishes the rules of engagement.
So I think there's probably a difference between gossip and speech that is meant to bring people closer together. So the rabbis they would like us not to be talking about each other very much at all. You can still interact with people. You can ask about Mrs. Goldberg's health, right? Because maybe I'll bring her chicken soup later. That would not be considered gossip, right? Because the intention is I need information to establish that social network, right? To strengthen that social network. If I say, and did you hear about her son? No wonder she's sick, right? That's where, and it's very easy to go that next step. Yes, I saw her yesterday, that house of hers. I don't know how she lives it, right? So we go really easily and really quickly and habitually to gossip, which actually it's not even gossip. Really, I think what they would say is slander.
And it doesn't matter if it's true.
If it's true, it has absolutely no bearing on whether or not it's slander. Like that's our English law term. You shouldn't be talking about somebody who's in the room.
So, I mean, like, we're talking to you, how are you? I'm not saying, how is Mrs. Goldberg? Is she still well? If I wanted to know that, I would call Mrs. Goldberg.
You could do that. But I think it's not considered slander to ask about her health if your intention is to go help her.
So is part of it like elevating the conversation? Because if you're not gossiping, then you're doing other. First of all, you're getting to where you need to be, which is really hard at that time. And secondly, you're elevating the conversation and you're learning things that actually matter.
Yes. So Miriam, that's a great point that Miriam makes. That is kind of the point. The rabbis say we spend so much time talking about other people and all this crap. We don't spend time talking about what's important, right? We don't talk Torah. We should be talking Torah.
All the time?
All the time. That's what we should be doing all the time. Yes, Margot.
Okay, ask your rabbi.
Rabbi, a number of years ago, when Rabbi Cheryl was the rabbi, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, she spoke on the subject for her sermon for that day. Later that day, I was meeting Gary Corman at Martin's sister's house. Martin was my second husband. And when we got out of, I got out of the car and I met him there, and he got out. He was invited to Martin's sister's house for dinner that night because they know each other and so forth. So Gary says to me, "What did Rabbi Luard speak about?" Because I went to the synagogue and he was in the corner and was at Wadsworth. So I said, she spoke about how gossip is something that we really, should avoid and all that. And he said, "What will we talk about?"
I ran into the same thing. I was talking to one of my grandchildren when they were in their teens, and we went through this whole thing about Lashon Hara, and I forget what it was, but there are 10 different things. And she looked at me. She said, "Well, but at school there'd be nothing to talk about." And it's particularly true of teenagers and kids who spend so much.
Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all that is gossip. People have everything that we fill our free time, empty time with. It's pretty much just about what other people are doing. And you can spend however much or little time you want on it, and you're done, and it's like empty calories. Nothing's been elevated. You've got nothing from it.
There is one, except there is some evidence that people are getting depressed from it, because we judge our insides by other people's outsides, right? So we judge that we're sitting home doing nothing when they're doing this fabulous, right? And that kids are going there, really kids. Young adults are really suffering from this sense of I'm a loser because I'm not doing all those fun things they're doing this Saturday night, I'm sitting home alone, and so it's a real issue.
I believe there is a time when you're obligated to talk about somebody else, and that is to save a third party.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I had dealings with person A who was a crook, and I knew it and I could prove it, and person B comes to me and says, "Oh, I'm about to do a deal with person A," I would actually be obliged to warn that person.
Yes.
But that, I think, is the only case.
Barbara?
I would like to get back to what you said about the rabbis permitting lies that bring, you said, peace. Now, can you just expand on that?
They point to the example of Aaron, that he was a rodef shalom. He was a pursuer, a chaser after peace. And that Moses and Miriam have an episode, right? She talks about Moses, and she's stricken with leprosy. And then she's healed. Moshe prays for her, and she's healed. And there's a midrash that says they weren't speaking. Moses and Miriam weren't speaking to each other. That it was a very serious rupture in the relationship. And so Aaron went to Miriam and said, "Moses feels really badly about everything that's happening, and he really wants to make up." And he went to Moses and said, "Miriam feels really badly about everything that's happening, and she really wants to make up." And they made up. And so for the rabbis, that's an example of Aaron was not telling the truth, but it was a lie that was to preserve the peace. That was to beyond preserve. It was to create peace.
Wasn't there a story of when Sarah was she laughed and God lies? Remember when
Sarah lied and said she didn't laugh.
And said I didn't laugh.
She didn't laugh, and she actually did, because God didn't want Abraham to think that she did. Yeah.
No, it's that God leaves that part out.
He left it out
when
by
he says
omission.
something. When the character God says something, God leaves out the part where she says, "What? I'm going to get pregnant with a guy that old, right?" And so, so God didn't want Abraham to be offended or to hurt his feelings, and so God leaves that out.
I recently had this conversation with my grandma.
He just omitted that.
Yeah. Were you going to say something? Yep.
I was just going to ask, to be clear, is this particular section referring to gossip, or are we saying that all impurity comes back to gossip?
So it's rabbinic. So it's way after the biblical period, right? I'm just lifting it up, because how much time do we want to spend in the Parashat? But to show that the rabbis took kind of the seriousness of Tzaraat and applied it to speech, right? Speech was that important to them because other traditions would take it somewhere else, wouldn't they? Like, other interpretation. If other traditions were trying to bring this whole business into their current time and what does it mean for us, I can imagine a lot of places they'd go. Sin, sinful thoughts, lustful thoughts. That's what this is really about, right? But where did the rabbis go? The rabbis go to, it's about speech. They took speech that seriously.
And all of this that we're, analyzing or looking into, like the meaning of it. I mean, is this particular? Because I know you've spoken of it before. If you wouldn't mind just putting it into context again, it seems historically, is what we're speaking about the organization of society, the centralizing of society beyond just your, who's in your tent with you, which was stories that we had earlier on. It seems like this is about centralizing kind of power or kind of organization of society. That's historical and really just meaning from this.
Both, right? So this book is different from the stories about who's in our tent, right? Because those are the patriarchal narratives. Those are our foundational stories about the founding family, right? Our tribe. This is a manual. Leviticus is a manual for the priests. So we're getting the technical details of the central agency for maintaining the right ritual relationship between God and the people of Israel.
So it's a very lay comment to that. If after we don't have the priesthood like this, and all the, like we were saying a few weeks back, Isaiah, all the rabbis that challenged the priesthood, that what is the relevance then of studying what the priests got to do. In evolution, we move so far from that.
So that they often metaphorize this. They'll talk about the altar of the heart and what we offer on the altar of the heart, right? So they often turn it into metaphor. For them, for the early rabbis, this was all they had left, was reading it, right? That once it was gone, they were devastated that it was gone. And all they had left was to read about it. So that's originally some of the instinct was that's the only way we stay connected to it is to read it. And then it was considered, they said it was considered as if you did it. If we read it, it's as if you did it. That's why in every single morning service there's a whole section of sacrifices, describing sacrifices. Because it was considered that if we read that section every morning, it's as if we are still participating in the temple.
Even though it's been given more to the people.
Right. Because it wasn't given to the people. History caused it. The Romans caused it. Do you know what I'm saying?
But I'm just saying in the morning service then, if you're reading it as you
right.
don't have to be the priest to be, it's as if you're doing it as if the priest.
It's as if you're participating in the system that fell. Because they still kind of, even though they were pushing against it, on some level they still glorify it. Right? It's a complicated relationship they have. We have to some of this. But how do we take it into our time? Right, that's an excellent question. So this is how Larry Kushner brings it to our time. We seem to have lost the ability to discern the difference between being in a state of ritual purity and being in one of ritual defilement. Indeed, we have even forgotten that defilement comes from contact with death. But the categories are still there. All we have to show for our sophisticated amnesia is a nagging sense of discomfort and contamination. The Bible is, of course, keenly aware of these modes of being, and here prescribes a ritual for returning to a state of purity from the inevitable contamination to which we are all condemned. It grows on the walls of our bedrooms like mold, and in the interiors of our psyches, an alien growth. It's immune to cleansers and medicines because it is not evil, dirt, or illness. But it's still there. Isn't that what organized religion is supposed to do? With water and blood and birds, hyssop and cedarwood and sacrifice or whatever to make our houses fit again for habitation. Just saying. Rabbi Harold Schulweis talks about the fact that the rabbis, right, take this to be motzi shem ra, that this is about slander. And he says the tongue is to be watched, for the tongue in rabbinic tradition is likened to a sharpened arrow. A libelous word is not like a sword. When a victim begs for mercy, a drawn sword can be returned to its sheath. But what can you do with an arrow once it leaves the bow? Call it back? So it is with libel and gossip. The Talmud, Baba Metzia, explains that a monetary wrong can be repaid, but the loss of a reputation is beyond reparation. Therefore, an insult to the character of a human being is worse than stealing property from them. Words are powerful. They are to be used with wisdom and sensitivity. Rabbi Shimon in the 2nd century said, "Do not comfort your friend while the dead rise before him," which means do not be precipitous in comforting the bereaved. Allow his grief to be expressed. And there are several examples that he gives from the Talmud about speaking and speech. He says, words form our most intimate ecology. They surround us. The walls have ears. All this was before television. With the advent of television, the walls have mouths. We have invited hundreds of mouths into our living room. Television sets fill our homes, and on or off prime time, nothing is sacred and nothing is private. No private parts, no private thoughts. On the contrary, the spotlight focuses upon infidelity, perversion, indiscretion, vulgarity, obscenity. They fill our living rooms with relentless exhibitionism and voyeurism. So if we take a minute to think that now the walls have mouths, and we think about the quality of what comes out of those mouths, it's an interesting, and I'm a big fan of TV. I'm a big fan of TV. So I'm not I'm not one of those people who's going to leap to, right, how horrible it is. I do think we don't spend much time thinking about what it is we marinate in now, right? You go home and it's no longer you're with the people, you're listening to the people who you live with. Now we go home and our house is filled with the sound of whoever, right? Yelling whatever, right? Or I think about reality TV, right? How popular reality TV is these days. And if you think about reality TV, most of it is about people having conflict, right? It's about a voyeuristic kick that we get from watching people fight, right? Or they're idiots, and you're like, and you're watching it because you think they're idiots. So that we get to feel somehow superior, looking in on their lives. And I'm just keenly aware when we come to this kind of a parsha and come to this kind of a conversation, I'm so aware that we've allowed ourselves to be bathed in, like he says, vulgarity and obscenity, and I think about the news, right? The anger, the vitriol, and I'm like, and we consider that normal now, that we are in that all the time. It's just, and our children are being raised in that all the time. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but my young person is never far from that device. Right? There's just always something coming in, always. So Rabbi Schulweis says, our homes are oases in a wilderness of vituperation. On the posts of our houses are affixed a mezuzah, a parchment of words, which includes the verse, all these words which I command you this day, you shall teach them diligently to your children when you rise up and when you lie down. The home, the haven of the heart and soul, must resist the incursion of mass culture so filled with violence, enmity, derision, name-calling. We must be careful that we do not catch the virus of incivility, that we speak with each other, parents and children, husbands and wives, with kindness. We are fragile human beings, and words can shatter us. We are a people committed to unity, and words must remind us of our kinship.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.